Hello everyone, welcome to Mr. Noctory. Today we will visit a remote island called Aotearoa. The traditional Maori tattooing method does not use needles but a chisel called uhi. The tattoos symbolize identity, genealogy, social status. Women usually tattoo around the lips and chin. Men tattoo the whole face. The tattooing process is a sacred ritual accompanied by chants, never a trend. The tattoo ceremony, Tohunga Tamoko, the tattoo master, wears a fishskin apron, holds the uhi, chisel. Tools often include fish bones, soot ink, and flax fiber bindings. Each strike echoes with a crack, painful but sacred. Before we begin, if you truly find this a peaceful place to hide at night, please like and subscribe. Only if you really want, no pressure. Like the old tavern rule, you stay only if you need a quiet seat. And you know what I love most? Seeing the comments, knowing where you're from and what time it is. Whether New York or Norway, 1 in the morning or 5 in the morning, you're still here. And I see you. Now, dim the lights. Turn on a small fan if you have one. Not because it's hot, but for the gentle buzzing sound. You don't remember what time you fell asleep. You're not even sure if it rained last night. But you know one thing. This morning, when you opened your eyes, your face was still pale. Pale as if no one had ever passed through your life. No mother, no father, no tribe, no history. Just you and your skin. But in Aotearoa, people do not leave skin bare for long. Not because they hate emptiness, but because they fear oblivion. Your ancestors, the sunburnt warriors, did not keep diaries. No passwords, no memory storage accounts. They didn't back up to the cloud. They carved memories into their faces. No joke, truly carved. With ink black as hearth smoke, with chisels made from fish bones. By the hands of one called Tohunga Tamoko, the storyteller who needs no words. Just touch. The circle on your uncle's forehead is a symbol of wisdom. The vertical slash on your grandmother's nose is the presence of ancestors. The swirl around your father's chin is a lifelong commitment to the tribe. No one says these out loud, but everyone understands. Faces here are not for looking at. Faces are for reading. Because here, a pale face is not new. It means there is nothing worth remembering. White skin is not clean. It is empty. It's like a blank page no one wants to write on. Not because it's not good enough, but because people don't yet know if you will choose honesty or just write what's easy to hear. So everyone looks at you longer than usual. They don't look because of your appearance. They look to ask themselves, does this boy have the courage to become a story? You once asked, why tattoo? Can't we remember with our hearts? Last night, you sat alone before a cold ash fire. You didn't shout or pray for anything grand, just whispered, as if talking to your great-grandfather through smoke. Grandfather, if tomorrow I endure the pain, endure the tattoo, will you stand close by? No one answered, only the crackling fire, as if someone was quietly laughing beyond the world. But the heart no one sees, and the face everyone must see. So this morning, sitting by the fire, ashes covering your pillow, smoke curling into your hair, you remembered the first time you saw a moko face. It was the old man standing by the puriri tree, eyes clouded, forehead cracked like volcanic stone. As a child, you feared him. Every time he smiled, his face seemed to move, as if hundreds of waves rippled across it. You thought he was a wizard, but now you understand. He was just an overflowing history book. And that smile was the footnote on the last page. You know, Today is the day your face begins to tell stories. You might feel pain. You might bleed. You might faint from the smell of ink and the chisel striking your cheekbone. But from tomorrow, when you meet a stranger, you won't need to introduce yourself. You just turn your face. Because from today on, you are no longer anonymous. You are a walking history book. And if you don't manage to carve anything on your face, it means you didn't leave anything for the world. There was once such a boy. He almost got tattooed, but he fled the ceremony, not because he feared pain, but because he feared no one would remember him even with tattoos. He left the village on a misty morning. No one stopped him. No one spoke of him again. When nothing is written on your face, the tribe acts as if you never had a name. That fear haunted your childhood. If I'm not brave enough to be carved, will I vanish like that boy? And those who want to know who you are only need courage enough to look straight into your eyes and listen. You wake again, and if you remember last night's dream, it's the strangest since you turned 10. A strange hand touched your forehead, warm as the sun in the rainy season. No face visible, only eyes full of ancient rivers. Upon waking, your forehead is still warm, and you know, today no one wakes you. You have been called back. Not sure if it's the third or fifth time. It's not yet daylight, but no longer dark. That vague blue-grey light is when Aotearoa breathes its first breath of the day. You don't need a clock. You know you woke at the right time, because the ruru, moorpork owl, has just stopped, and the pork's waka waka, fantail bird, has just begun to sing like a hurried whisper. No one wakes you. Your body remembers the sound of the thatched roofs rustling in the sea wind, remembers fish slapping the floor when your father returns from early fishing, and remembers that today you won't have a normal breakfast. Today you will fast. With every step your stomach asks, "Are you sure? Without food, how will you bear pain?" But the growling no longer confuses you. It is like a distant drum, signaling the start of the ceremony. It's not hunger that weakens you, but hunger that lightens you from all the burdens of a child not yet recorded in history, not because of asceticism, but because you're about to touch your soul. And who wants their soul stained by burnt fish? You step out of the tent. Your feet press into damp, cold, soft earth like an apology from the dew. Smoke rises from other houses, slow, thin, like old souls not yet vanished. You pass your grandmother. She says nothing. Just looks at you, hands soaking flax fibers in warm ash. That will be the hair tie today, so your hair won't fall into your face when the tattooing begins. So your eyes see clearly, not the tattooer, but the ancestors looking through that person. Farther off, you see your father folding a porch, though no rain is coming. Maybe he just wants you to have a decent home to return to after becoming a moko bearer. Your little brother is peeling kawakawa fruit. His mouth smiles, but his hands tremble. He's not allowed to come with you to the tattoo place, but he wants you to know. I'm too scared to go, but I will tell the kids later that you were the first in this generation to dare to step forward. You don't cry, not because you're not afraid, but because last night you cried enough. Cried softly, cried quietly, like a ritual washing away the last weakness clinging to your brow. This morning, a periri tree holds a bird. Not one you usually see. A tuer with a shimmering blue neck, voice cracking like drops of wood. It looks at you without blinking, and you think, if ancestors reincarnate as birds, this must be my great-grandfather. It does not fly away, just lifts its head, as if telling you, go on. Tohunga is already waiting at the edge of the village. No one invited him. He came because he knows, because ancestors called before you could speak. Beside him is an old stone table, handed down through 10 generations. No one dares to repair it, because the chip on the left corner is from a failed strike. The person who struck it died during the ceremony, and since then, no one sits on the left side anymore. You bow your head, kneel down, hungry, eyes dry, gripping flax fibers tightly like holding onto the past. No one speaks. And then, the first click sounds, the sound of the chisel striking cheekbone. No one screams, only you, inside. You think you will yell, but stay silent enough to hear your heart, learning to write history with blood. No tears, only one word you repeat inside. Stay. Stay with the pain. Stay with the ancestors. Stay so you don't wash away like the early rains. Aotearoa has awakened. The trees are still green. The birds still sing. The sea still waves. Only you are different. You are about to stop being the one without writing. About to become the one with history on your face. And the strange thing is, you don't see it as a loss. You see it as the only way not to disappear. No one told you that physical pain is only the easiest part of the ritual. After the first click, the pain doesn't spread like fire. It's small, in waves, as if someone is writing your name on your face with a knife. Each chisel strike, a letter. Each line of blood, a period. And your face, the blank page that ancestors silently record history on with flesh and bone. You thought you would get used to it, but no. At one point, your ears ring. You no longer hear birds, no longer hear waves, only the steady tapping of the chisel on bone. A lullaby from a god who needs no words. You close your eyes, and then you see water. Not seawater, not village well water, but a stream as clear as the universe's first breath, flowing over your head, down your neck, into your chest, cool, light, and very ancient. Tohunga says nothing. He just washes the chiseled wounds with water taken from the sacred mountain peak, where no one is allowed to go alone, where stones know how to listen. They say that water not only heals skin, but helps the soul not to fall away. You must wash your face clean, so the ancestors have a place to sit. If your face still carries the scent of anger, fear, or desire, they won't stay. They will leave, and you will carry a face empty of soul. Tohunga places one hand on your forehead, the other pours water from a power shell. The water flows over the shell's edge, shimmering purple, green, pink, like fragments of a preserved sunset. When it touches your skin, it's cold, like an unfinished memory. You feel chills down your spine, not from pain, but from knowing you're being cleansed by something. That knows who it is. The power shell isn't just for beauty. It used to be the ear of the sea god, and today it listens to you. Cold, as if you're being slapped by your own past. But you do not dodge, because you know you're being washed in memory. You look up, meet Tohunga's eyes. Nothing special, except something familiar. You suddenly know he once lay here too, once felt pain like you, once shivered when sacred water touched the freshly chiseled place. No one speaks, but his eyes say to you, I know, I passed, and now it's your turn. Everything you once were, a lazy child who hated baths, a sneaky eater when your mother looked away, one who once wanted to run away from fate. All is being washed away. Only the person your ancestors want you to become remains. You slightly curl your lips, not to smile, but because a drop just fell into your mouth. Salty, but not like seawater salt. It's the scent of time, the taste of tears, and the quiet aftertaste of those who washed their faces before you. You swallow and feel your throat tighten, as if drinking a wordless story. You open your eyes, not clearly, blurred by water, but brighter because you no longer fear the dark. Your face now is no longer just yours. It is a map, a story, a temporary home for ancestors. You are no longer you. You are the keeper of what time dares not forget. But then, you hesitate at a thought. A question rises, without words or reason. Can one ever be completely cleansed? Or is it just learning to live with what's not yet washed away? You think the pain is over? Oh no. So far it's only the introduction. Tohunga sits down. His face turns serious like a calligrapher about to write the first character on ancestral paper. He signals you to lie on your side, very gently, very softly, as if what's about to happen needs the earth's crust to stay still. You lie down, face toward the cold ash fire, eyes looking up at the roof, where early light slips through a hole, like an ancestor's eye watching you saying, "Stretch your skin, kid. History is about to write." Then he begins, not haphazardly, but stroke by stroke, line by line, as if your skin is silk, and he is a 1,000-year weaver, reweaving your bloodline with your own blood. At times, you forget who you are. Only a surface remains, an unfinished map. No one's child, no one's village resident. You are skin, and history is the handwriting on it, without asking permission. You feel the needle touch, then pull away, then touch again. 1 mark, 2 marks, as if history is knocking with the hand of a very patient person. Outside, children laugh. Roosters crow late. The wind blows through wall cracks. But for you, the world now is only skin, needles, and what will never disappear. Tohunga doesn't look at you. He looks at the tattoo, as if reading a story from the future. You see him pause briefly when chiseling near your temple, as if touching a secret you do not yet know. And suddenly, you feel red, not through his eyes, not through words, but through your own flesh. Sometimes he exhales softly, like a person correcting a spelling mistake by carving it out with a chisel. You breathe too. Each time the needle touches, you breathe. Not from pain, but because you don't know what else to do to hold yourself from exploding. Sometimes you think, why don't they tattoo with ink like others? Why must it hurt like this? Out there, people tattoo butterflies, lotuses, then take selfies. Here, you tattoo a path, leading to the deepest pain. No anesthesia, no relaxing playlist, only a serious old man and a chisel, like the tool of a god. But then you remember your grandmother's words. What comes easy? Memory leaves easy. You are letting your skin remember for what your mind might forget. A small mark on your cheek. That's your father, who fished for the village 7 rainy days without coming home. A curve on your chin. That's your great-grandmother, who raised 9 children on a daily piece of fern root. Each mark is a person. Each person is a reason you won't disappear. You begin to get used to it, not to pain, but to rhythm. Touch, breathe, touch, breathe. Like a wordless song, just for flesh. You don't sleep. But you're not fully awake either. You're in between, where history is written in silence. Every needle stroke, every drop of blood, is an uneditable paragraph. No erasing, no drafts. History here is carved for the first and last time. If wrong, you must live with that mistake on your face forever. Ancestors don't need you to be eloquent. They only need you to endure a little. So there's a place to write their names. You once thought, the most painful must be the cheek, or the chin, or the area near the ear. But no, it's all wrong. The most painful is the forehead. Yes, that's right. The place you thought was for thinking is now used for enduring. Tahunga taps lightly on your forehead, not to check, but to announce, now comes the important part. You chuckle, then you stop laughing. The tattoo needle touches between your eyebrows, the quietest place on your face, and now it's gone. No screams, only a faint whistle from your own heart. Each stroke chiseled into the forehead without warning, and you feel as if it's touching thoughts not yet formed. Perhaps that's why the Maori see the forehead as the place holding mori, a person's life force. Not the heart, not the liver, but the forehead. Because when you no longer have strength to speak, people can still read you by what's carved there. You try to close your eyes, but each time you do, it feels like your scalp is being lifted off your skull. There are moments you almost forget you are human. Maori do not write on paper. They carve where mind meets soul, the forehead, because only what hurts enough can be remembered deeply, and it's just a symbol being made by the hand of someone very old and very determined. No soundtrack, only tattoo sounds, breathing, and a fleeting thought. In the modern world, people say wrinkles are signs of experience. Here, you have a chisel mark into your brain, so no one needs to ask what you've been through. I wonder if someday my descendants will understand this forehead. Outside, the light is fully up. The scent of old ashes melts in the sun, and your shadow, tilted on the earthen wall, now looks like someone who lived 1,000 years ago. Tahunga stops, says nothing. He only nods softly, a nod like placing a period at the end of an ancient spell. You sit up, slowly, because if you stand too fast, you fear. Wisdom will fall from your forehead where it was just carved. You gently touch your forehead skin and feel warmth, not from inflammation, but because it knows something you have yet to understand. You sit there, hand on forehead, and wonder, have I just been carved into or called out of oblivion? You think after the forehead it will be easier, but no. Now comes the cheeks, the softest land on your face, where someone once kissed you as a child, where your mother touched to check your temperature, and now, where the needle carves like the prelude to an inner epic. Tahunga says nothing, just places his rough hand on your cheek, as if asking, do you still remember your ancestors? Before you answer, he begins tattooing. Left cheek, the side connected to the heart. Each chisel stroke, as if your mother is telling you something. You forgot. An old meal, a lullaby smoky with kitchen fires. You almost hear her call you home at dusk, not with words, but how she touched your cheek, so lightly, only memory recognizes. A vague warning. You are child of the earth, don't let the wind take you away. You blink, not from emotion, but because ash dust falls from the ceiling, or maybe it's tears welling that you don't want to drip onto the tattooist's hand. Then the right cheek. He changes position, changes hands, but not his gaze. He looks at you like a father watching a child grow. too fast. Right cheek, the side linked to reason, honor, kinship. Here you must not blink, for any flaw becomes a crooked corner of the lineage. Your right cheek, where you once gritted your teeth when scolded, now carved with honor, like your father saying, "You may cry, but don't turn away." You feel your skin twitch with each needle touch, not from pain, but because you clearly realize, from now on, anyone looking at your cheek will see your mother and father there. You exhale, not inhale in time, because a flood of memories washes over. As a child, you were slapped just for not greeting an elder properly. And now, your cheek is inscribed with the names of every person in your tribe, every bloodline that flowed before you, not in words, but in the curves of ancestral geometry. In the other world, people cherish wedding photos of their grandparents. Here, they look at your cheek and know where you belong. No questions asked, no birth certificates needed, just a glance, and they know who you are. You smile, a crooked smile from pain, but also the first smile you see, that you have a family, not a living together family, but a living within family. You dare not move sharply, because every muscle on your cheek carries a piece of someone's soul map before you. Tahunga stops, doesn't wipe sweat, says nothing, just reaches out, and you, cheek slightly swollen, know. This is no beautification ritual. This is a ritual to clarify who you are. You think after the cheeks it will be done, but no. History, like a mother cleaning the house, always finds one more place to wipe. Now comes the lips and chin. The final lands on the face, where words are spoken, where smiles begin, and where the deepest regrets were once kept. Tahunga says nothing. He only nods lightly. The needle touches your lower lip, and suddenly, all the lies you ever told flood back. I'm studying. I didn't break that vase. I'm not sad. All at once. And you understand why no one should tattoo lips unless they're truly ready to face every lie they've ever spoken. Each tattoo stroke on the lip doesn't make you scream in pain, but makes you want to be silent forever. Not because your mouth is swollen, but because for the first time, you know words have geometric consequences. You've laughed to soothe, laughed to avoid conflict, laughed when nothing was funny. And now, those smiles are carved to remind you. Every fake smile is a real wound. Then the chin, where you once rested your hand while daydreaming, where you tossed your head to act unconcerned, where your father once gripped to make you look straight when speaking. Now, it is pinned down by every carved stroke, each line like an oath. You will not betray your ancestors. You will not run from your identity. You will not use this mouth to deny what is carved on your face. You shiver, not from cold, but because your chin is trembling, like it has held too many unspoken things, and now finally carved out, so you don't have to swallow them in silence forever. You want to ask Tahunga something, but you cannot open your mouth, not from pain, but because it seems now every word spoken must be worthy of what's just been tattooed. In the other world, people teach speaking truth. Here, people carve truth on the lips. So if you ever forget, your lips will remind you. And if you still try to forget, the chin will not forgive. You swallow, slowly, like swallowing a whole past. And in that silence, you hear a very old voice, like wind from a century ago. The mouth is for speaking truth. If not, then keep silent. Tahunga withdraws the needle. He does not ask if you're okay, because he knows if you can still stay silent out of respect, then you're okay. You have survived the cheeks, lips, chin, places you thought soft but cut like a knife to the heart. Tahunga says, sit down, rest. You don't know if it's rest or rest to receive more wounds. A child approaches, no older than 10. In hand, a roasted sweet potato, blackened like storm clouds but smelling like winter with mother. It thrusts the potato into your hand, no words, then sits beside you, silent as the earth. You are silent too. The only sound is your stomach, and the potato, when broken in half, cracks softly like wind through rotten wood. You don't want to eat. You're not hungry, just unsure if you can swallow anything more after swallowing memories from ears to throat. The child keeps watching you. It points to your nose and says, yours is still there. You stare blankly. It raises a finger to its own face, where, indeed, there is no nose. The scar is healed, but the story is not. And you realize, in this tribe, some lose a part of their face to keep their honor. The nose, in many cultures, is for smelling. But for the ancient Maori, the nose is identity breathed from blood. Did wrong, nose cut off. Betrayed, nose cut off. Fleeing the battlefield, no need for execution, just breathe differently than others. You swallow the potato, bitter, not from burnt skin, but because suddenly you smell punishment. Or maybe you no longer dare to smell at all. Because in this culture, smelling is not just biology. It's how the soul recognizes right. Smelling betrayal, smelling the breath of lies. And when you have no nose, not because you lose a sense, but because you lose the right to judge for yourself. You must live by another's nose. Breathe by the ethics the village sets. No deep breaths unless someone nods permission, because suddenly you smell punishment. The nose, once a symbol of life, can become a sentence. Because here, the face is not just to be seen. It is an open file. Anyone can read. People don't write crimes on paper. They write them on cheeks, noses, the vertical slash down the face. And then you live with that sentence every time you see your reflection in water. And sometimes, in a small village, you don't need a court, just a blade and a mark right on your face. You turn to the child. No questions, just look. You clearly see in its eyes no explanations are needed, no hope, no anger, only a sad familiarity, as if used to living without demanding back what was lost. It doesn't need your pity, nor does it want you to call it brave. It just exists as a silent witness amid a noisy tribe. It smiles, not sadly, as if saying, I have no nose, but I am still here, and I am still Maori. Tahunga returns. He doesn't ask if you have finished eating, just looks at your nose, nods. And you know, break time is over. The next part will touch what you've hidden more deeply than the nose, like ears, neck, and memory. You stand. The potato in your hand has cooled, but your palm is warm, because you just held a lesson shaped like a potato. You thought carving skin was the ultimate, that the pain was in the needle biting flesh. But no. The worst pain comes when you realize every tattoo not only carves your name, but also calls the names of those who have vanished. Tahunga picks up a long carving stick by his wrist, not threatening, not hurried. He just places it on your skin, right where your father once laid his hand when blessing you. You shudder, not from cold, but because the memory feels like wind. rushing in when your skin is unprepared. You hear your father's voice in the wind, not clear, just the sound of wood hitting the roof, fish bones clacking beneath the boat's floor, fire crackling in the night as he tells ancestral stories without looking at you, because Maori do not look directly into sorrow. You once sat beside your father, pretending to sleep so he would keep talking. Now you sit here, awake like never before, and your body is becoming the page he never got to write on. The tattoo begins to take shape, not just a pattern, but a flow, from him, through blood, through your life, then carved down. Tohunga whispers, "This is living memory, not decoration." You don't answer. Because you know, if you open your mouth you will cry. And in this ceremony, tears are not allowed to fall, only allowed to go inward. The child from before still sits far off. It looks at you, but this time with different eyes. The eyes of someone who knows what you have lost and will soon receive it in another way. You think of your father, not when he was strong, but when he sighed in the night, thinking no one heard. You remember that sound, and now it lies right beneath your skin. You don't ask how long the tattooing will last, because every time the carving stick touches, you hear your father's bare feet walking on gravel, his whistle calling the dogs home, and once, his words, "If you have children, don't let them forget their father's voice." And now, you do not forget, because that voice has become a shape, and that shape lives on your cheek, alive as if your father never left. You once thought tattoos were meant for the living to see, for someone to admire, for someone to fear. But to the ancient Maori, the tattoo is a message for those in the other world, not for today, but for the day when you are no longer here to explain who you are. Tohunga draws on your back, the skin you've never seen yourself, because some things only ancestors need to read. You tremble lightly when the needle touches your spine, not from pain, but from a strange feeling, as if someone stands behind you, reading every line he is writing. No one speaks. The wind stops blowing. The child is no longer nearby. Only the sound of ink soaking into skin, beat by beat, like the heartbeat of someone who lived longer than you. You think of graves without headstones, names no one mentions, and realize, maybe, your tattoo is the tombstone you carry, not for anyone to remember, but so you, when you leave, have something to present. Maori believe the soul, when leaving the body, must pass many gates. Each tattoo is an unforgeable ticket. No one can have another carry it for them. No one tattoos for pride, because ancestors don't care how cool you look. They just look and ask, "Where has our bloodline gone?" And each gate asks, "Who are you?" Not in words, but with tattoos. And if your skin cannot speak, you do not pass. No one opens the door for a soul without records. Tohunga carves another line near your spine. You think of the oral histories ancestors told, and understand your life doesn't need to repeat anything, because now your body is the history book, and Tohunga is just helping you write the last chapter, not for you to read, but for those not yet born to know someone once lived rightly. You feel your spine like a scroll unrolled, not for others to read, but for ancestors to know you didn't ruin the family name. A drum sounds, not to signal the end, but to call souls. Someone in the village lights a fire, not for you, but for the departed to witness. You're not tattooing for yourself. You're tattooing so that after death, someone sees you and says, This person once lived rightly, and if lucky, a child, like the one before, will see your back as you collapse in the fishing forest. It will look, not ask, but deep inside it will know. This is the shape of someone who lived for their ancestors. Tohunga nods, not because the tattoo is finished, but because he just handed down a message. From this life to the next, you lie down, not to rest, but to write your name in a book that never closes. You thought after tattooing you'd rest. Wrong. The Maori don't let a body just turned heritage. Go to sleep right away. You are invited near the fire in the village centre. No one calls your name. Only the rustle, the night birds, and the tattoo on your face. Still hot as if still burning. You sit down. Beside you are elders. The fire is not big, but enough for every face to be seen. And you realize the fire here is not just for warmth. It is the shared memory of the village, when no memory lies in any one head, but drifts between smoke, flesh, and breaths, falling silent because they know what is being passed on. No one looks at each other long, but in the firelight you see, their faces glow, not from oil on skin, not from tears, but because tattoo ink under the firelight shines like embers. They do not laugh, but they are not cold either, only silent, like trees standing for generations. You are the new shoot. And tonight, you are allowed to sit among the forest of ancestors. An old man speaks, does not call names, does not ask questions. He only tells a story, beginning with, long ago. No one interrupts, no one applauds, because this is no performance. This is where memories travel through mouths, touch hearts, then vanish like ashes. You listen and feel as if someone is redrawing the tattoo on your cheek with words. Not every voice is clear, but the fire pulls memories out of your skin. No asking, no permission, only quietly doing what it always does, exposing all the things you hide. You do not ask for meaning, because if you have to ask, you are not ready. Some faces have no tattoos, no ink, no carving marks, but you still see them glow, not from skin, but from their eyes, because a gaze that has passed through too much fire glows itself, but you still see them glow. Because the fire reflects in their eyes, where invisible scars truly exist. Some are not allowed tattoos. Some lost their fathers before knowing who they were. Some were banished from the village, then returned with empty faces. And when they sit near you, you feel your skin warm, as if your tattoo apologizes for having nothing to show. A child yawns. An old man pours water. The night passes. No one counts time. Because if the fire still burns, the ancestors remain. You are not sleepy yet, though your body aches. Because you know, this is the first time you truly sit among the living and the dead. You look around, see your own face, reflected in others' eyes. See your name, not on paper, but on fire, on wind, on someone's skin smiling. And you silently think, maybe tomorrow I will forget this dream, but the tattoo will remember for me. You wake before dawn. The ground is still damp. No one wakes you, but the tattoo seems not to sleep. It's warm, like a reminder it is still working. You touch your cheek, no pain, just a little itch. As if your skin is learning how to exist again, but this time with memory. You suddenly think, maybe the tattoo is a prayer. No one reads it aloud, but it still flies. To the ancestors, to you, in a distant future, where you need to hear yourself again. As if your skin is learning how to exist again, but this time with memory. You sit up, no one around, only water and wind, the only sounds the tattoo hasn't silenced. You hear something, not quite words, not quite thoughts, but a feeling, as if a voice is whispering under your skin. Not someone calling you, but yourself, at some point in the future, whispering back. The tattoo is not dry yet, meaning it is still changing, like a memory just written, still wet. If you are sober enough, honest enough, you can change a letter or add a line before everything closes into the irreversible. It's not closed yet. It's still finding a place to stay. You understand? This is the only chance to say something before the ink hardens into fate. You sigh, not from regret, but because you know, from now on, every action of yours must fit the story carved. You look at your hand, nothing special. But now, when you raise your hand to touch your cheek, you touch a part of yourself that belongs to history, can't be removed, can only live on, worthy of its new shape. Children in the village begin to run outside. Their footsteps sound like early season wind. A boy looks at you, says nothing, then runs off. You think, tomorrow he will ask. The day after, he will want. And someday, he will sit under the chisel to become the person he sees today. You stand. No one tells you what to do, but you see the eyes of the departed, not from pictures, not from graves, but from the tattoo itself, as if they are reading every line you live. But you know, today, you must live as if someone is reading you line by line, not with eyes, but with heart, and by listening to whispers from the still wet ink. Alexander the Great, the man who conquered the world, with a loaf of rock-hard bread and the sadness of breakfast. This is Pella, the capital of the Kingdom of Macedon. No red carpets, no golden palaces, only coal stone walls, the wind blowing through corridors like it blows over the bare chests of soldiers. A city where children grow up to the sound of horse hooves, where even princes must learn to endure cold like soldiers. Alexander was born there, not to be pampered, but to learn to be hard like the stone paving the streets. If you're listening to this at 2 a.m, when the room is dark, only a faint night light flickers in the corner, and the fan spins steadily like the breath of a tired beast, then welcome. You are not alone, because someone else, over 2,000 years ago, also woke in a night without sleep. His name was Alexander. Somewhere in a small stone courtyard, Aristotle, then not a legend, just a calm teacher, stood with his back to the sun, holding a scroll, glancing through a window at his royal student. Perhaps he did not yet know he was teaching a man who would shake empires. And Alexander only knew that today he still had to finish the bowl of barley porridge or face another lecture on virtue through fasting. The man later called the Great. But at that moment, just a boy sat beside a cold bowl of porridge, eyes fixed on a sky not yet brightening, and a loaf of bread hard as brick waiting to be chewed like fate. No laughter from friends, no mother pouring soup beside him. Just alone, in the silence every royal family calls discipline. And maybe from very early, Alexander understood. Being a prince did not mean being openly loved, but learning to be strong without letting anyone see you learning. No one tells Alexander's story through meals. We remember battles, conquest maps, and praise painted on fortress walls. But before all crowns, glory and blood, there is breakfast, silent, pale grey, and dry as the first sigh of a king without a throne. And tonight, we won't tell of glory, but of hunger, of hard bread, of maza, barley porridge mixed with water, the staple food of ancient Greece, pressed into an earthenware bowl, tasteless, colourless, and often cold before your hand can reach it. No one praises maza, but thanks to it, for centuries, the Greek army survived, on bland taste and stubborn discipline stronger than any empire that ever fed on it, of barley porridge cooked from old grain and clear water, and of how a man learned endurance before he learned conquest. Lie down, and if tonight you cannot sleep, maybe, just maybe, Alexander sits beside you, silent, sharing half his old forgotten loaf, the one the world forgot, but history still owes a story. Relax your shoulders. Let Alexander tell you, not with words, but with the bread he once swallowed chokingly when too young to complain. Morning in Pella does not start with birdsong. Pella, the capital of Macedon, is not as grand as people imagine a future emperor's hometown to be. Flat-tiled roofs, grey limestone walls, and a silent sewer system flowing through the city like cold veins. Winter here is not gentle. It slips through door cracks, seeps into the walls, and cracks plaster like young hands not yet calloused. It starts with the sound of a wooden spoon scraping the bottom of an earthen bowl, clacking cold, steady as the heartbeat of a day when no one asks what you want. Alexander, not yet 10, sits upright on a low chair beneath his rank, before a cold bowl of maza, a thick mixture of ground barley and water, thick as memories of a honeyless childhood. Maza, a humble but enduring food, sustained not only commoners, but also the armies of ancient Greece. It has no taste, no smell, but is the only food that never betrays the eater during long campaigns. The Macedonians ate it like a duty, not for pleasure, just to survive. No one feeds him. No servants humbly bringing golden trays. At most, the white-bearded steward nods softly, like the breeze, and sets down a flat, hard slice of bread, as stiff as the table it rests on. That wooden spoon, an inanimate object, is the first thing Alexander learned to hold before a sword, its rough, short handle longer than the pride of an empire yet to be born inside that child. He scoops a spoonful, then chews. No complaints, no grimaces. Because in Pella, complaining was a luxury. Enduring was a duty born with noble blood. After breakfast, he steps into the courtyard. Before light floods the city, Alexander mounts Bucephalus, the stubborn black horse no one dared touch except him. Bucephalus obeyed Alexander because he saw its fear, the shadow of itself, and soothed it with a gentle pat. That was the first time Alexander tamed a creature, not with whip or force, but with the patience of a future king. From then on, every morning he rode Bucephalus around the yard, not to play, but to learn how to hold steady the horse's back, which later helped him hold steady the map of the world. The sun hasn't risen, but the sky is bright enough to see dust stains on the worn goat wool cloak. In the distance, guards train. Sword strikes shield. Shield hits sand. The noise does not startle him, because Alexander was born among those sounds, like others are born to lullabies. A day in Pella has no playtime, only reading time, philosophy time. time listening to Aristotle lecture on justice is the soul of the city-state, while your stomach drums because Maza cannot keep the promise. Aristotle does not allow Alexander to think superficially. Every philosophical concept must come with practical examples. He must understand responsibility not as theory, but by sitting still when hungry, not interrupting the teacher, because for him, philosophy is not to discuss, but to forge discipline of thought like steel. But Alexander does not ask, "Why must I learn this?" He only watches carefully, remembers, as if every word is an unsharpened weapon, because he knows only the victor is remembered, if that victor never reveals they were once hungry. At noon, he eats an olive, a slice of cheese as hard as his father's advice, and drinks diluted grape wine thin enough to wash hands with. It is not a feast, but a silent declaration of militarized education. Live enough to live enough, no more. At night, he sits again before the wooden tray. His father, Philip, may not be home, but he is everywhere, in the cold gaze of guards, in the neatly arranged food, and in the teacher's voice reading the ethical letters sent from the front lines. Philip is a warrior, a strategist, and a father who never lets his son forget. Loyalty to the homeland begins with chewing silently, perhaps drunk in some mansion, perhaps on the battlefield. But Alexander still eats as if the entire court watches. Every gesture, every glance, every bite. A lesson for a child taught never to be allowed to be a child. And when night falls, he lies down. No one tells stories. No one asks, "Are you sad today?" Only one repeated dream. One day, I will not have to eat cold porridge, but sit at the head of the table, with knife, fork, and an empire in hand. Lunch did not start with a bell, nor did it take place in a grand royal hall. In fact, it was a few miles from the palace, in a secluded garden near Miedza, where Aristotle demanded absolute silence, not for meditation, but so every word could sink into the head of a boy who would carry an empire on his shoulders. It began with a question. "Alexander, if a person is born a slave, can he become king?" The question dropped like a hard piece of bread, making a noise, but no one could swallow it. The boy, not yet 13, scooped a spoonful of lentils, chewed slowly, and didn't answer right away. Because that was the unspoken rule when eating with Aristotle. Don't rush to speak, lest philosophy spill out with the broth. Alexander and Aristotle's lunches were always the same, not because of a poor menu, but because it was part of a mental discipline. Aristotle believed that those who could not moderate their eating would lack the reason to govern the world. Every dish was carefully chosen, not too filling, not too tasty, not easily forgotten, for he taught that greatness must be nurtured from the most ordinary things, repeated until they become the core. A bowl of stewed lentils, a slice of bread toasted that morning, and diluted grape juice, so weak you'd have to drink twice to be sure you drank. But don't let this modesty fool you, because at that table, empires were conceived with wooden spoons and rhetoric. Aristotle did not eat like a monk. He ate like someone experimenting with philosophy on every lentil. "This sourness comes from vinegar," he said, "like the bitter things in life, necessary for sweetness to have a chance." Alexander was silent. He had just learned a principle. A ruler doesn't need to speak much, just knows how to listen, then use words at the right moment. The meal continued amid the tapping of spoons against bowls. Not only philosophy. Some days Aristotle lectured on how leaves absorb water and connected it to patience. Other days, he read Homer's poetry in a deep voice, pointing out how language, if used well, can be sharper than any sword. Alexander wasn't just learning to be king, he was learning to be human, according to a civilization that once knew how to cry for a poem. Aristotle told stories about Greek city-states, about Sparta, where children were starved to learn endurance, about Athens, where people debated until they forgot hunger, and about the difference between a leader and a mere commander. A good king knows when to let others think he's listening. Alexander nodded, not because he agreed, but because today's lentils were a bit salty. Sometimes Aristotle asked, if you had to choose between a strong army and a loyal friend, what would you choose? Alexander didn't answer. He pushed aside a lentil skin, then said, a loyal army, because inside it, there may be a loyal friend. Aristotle didn't praise him, nor did he ever praise immediately, because he knew a premature compliment nurtures arrogance instead of resilience. Alexander was a special student, and thus needed to be reminded. Greatness comes not from the right answer, but from the habit of asking the right question at the right time. He just smiled, as if the answer had opened another chapter of a book. This boy was growing faster than the world map. When the meal ended, no one cleared the table. It was part of the lesson. No meal is free, even for one destined to rule. Aristotle rose first, walking toward the sunlit porch. Alexander followed, wiping his mouth with his sleeve, and he carried in his belly not just lentils, but a fragment of an ideal about justice, duty, and power. Perhaps, if this world were rewritten through food, then the bowls of lentils in PELLA would be the opening chapter for Rome, Egypt, Persia. Because from a simple wooden table, two minds, teacher and student, had begun to rewrite the order of kingdoms once thought invincible. When the sun retreated behind the hills and the trumpet sounded soldiers back to camp, it was time for Alexander to enter the coldest room in the palace, the king's dining hall. No laughter, no intimacy between two men bound by blood, only a silent duel, where every glance was a slash, every grasp for food a guarded move. That room was not where father and son dined, but where a king tested the heart of his successor, with coldness as sharp as a honed blade. No, are you tired today? Question. Only the sound of wine poured into a bronze cup, and Philip's gaze, sharp as a blade freshly ground by victory. Alexander sat to Philip's right, the heir's seat, but also the most scrutinized. The cold wooden spoon in his hand stopped mid-air above a bowl of stew, not from hunger, but because he awaited the approving look. At a warrior's table like Philip's, eating before the king was almost treason. Dinner consisted of roasted goat, stale barley bread, and watered-down wine. Not because Macedon was poor, but because Philip believed a body used to comfort can't ride a horse. He ate fast, neat and silent, as if every chew was an attack on weakness. Alexander didn't know how to start a conversation. In his mind still lingered the image of last week's wedding feast, where Philip stumbled drunk, collapsing amid music. No one dared laugh, except Alexander, not out of rudeness, but pain, because for the first time he saw the invincible man could fall before a cup of wine and wounded pride. When he finally spoke about today's lesson, Philip cut him off decisively. Don't speak to me of justice while the Greeks laugh behind our backs. Alexander nodded, not because he agreed, but because he was used to it, used to all effort seeming small, next to what his father conquered. During dinner, Philip told war stories. How he used cavalry to surround Thessaly, how traitors were impaled in the town square, and how a real man was never allowed to shed tears, even if his knees bled. Alexander listened, memorized every word. No reaction, no retreat, because he knew a future king must learn to swallow even the bitterest things without a grimace. Sometimes dinner ended with a strong cup of wine, and sometimes with a scolding amidst spilling wine. Philip, when sober, was a great strategist, but when drunk, he became a man with loneliness as vast as his kingdom. And Alexander, though he did not fully understand, learned this: great power often comes with deep cracks no one is allowed to touch. Philip looked at his son, tired eyes, but scrutinizing every detail. If one day you rule, don't be too merciful, for people do not respect kindness. They only remember who makes them bow. Alexander didn't answer. He drank the bitter, strong wine without grimacing. That was his only way to say to his father, "I have grown up." When he stood, Philip only nodded. That nod had no words, but to Alexander it was heavier than any title, because he knew, for that father, a nod was rarer than spoils. A moment later, he vowed silently, if one day he sat in his father's seat, he would not nod lightly. No hugs, no head pats, no, "I'm proud of you." But Alexander kept that moment like a trophy, a nod from a man who doesn't give anything easily. That night, he did not sleep immediately. Lying on the limestone ceiling, listening to the wind howling in the hall, he wondered, if one day I surpass my father, will he forgive me? No one answered. Only the wooden spoon he still held, a reminder. Power does not come from blood, but from swallowing silence whole. There are meals that warm the heart. There are meals that make you remember your mother. And there is the meal on horseback, amid the pounding hooves and the smell of horse sweat, that makes you wish you had never been born with real teeth. Alexander, about 16 then, had begun going to battle with his father. Beneath him was Bucephalus, the horse no one else could ride. It was chosen not for its tameness, but for its wildness. Like Alexander's own youth, stubborn, quick, and always ready to leap across any boundary if someone let go of the reins. Not to fight, but to learn, and learn under a discipline no one pities. Philip did not believe in childhood comforts. He believed in calloused feet and timely hunger. Alexander travelled from dawn to dusk, eating standing, sleeping sitting, and sometimes no one could remember if it was Tuesday or the day before a battle. Learning how to hold a map against the wind, learning how to command without choking on the words, and learning to chew old bread hard as stone without breaking front teeth. The field lunch had no tablecloth. It had no flavour other than dust and sand. The bread was made from barley flour mixed with cold spring water, lightly baked over leftover coals from breakfast. The cheese was hard and dry as paving stones, and the olives still had pits, and tough as waiting for a letter from home that never came. No roasted meat, no one asking, "Are you gluten intolerant?" Only a piece of dry bread, baked 3 days earlier, wrapped in armour, and a cup of wine diluted thinner than the reputation of traitors. Alexander chewed slowly, because biting fast would crack his gums, but chewing too slow would get kicked in the back by the horse behind, mistaking him for nodding off. Once, a new soldier whispered, "Lord Alexander, does the prince ever have a proper lunch?" Alexander turned, smiled, mouth still crumbed with bread. He often refused special treatment. Once, a soldier brought him fresh water while the whole group was exhausted from the sun. Alexander just looked, then spilled the whole cup on the ground. If not everyone has it, I shouldn't be the first to drink. And so, in that scorching sun, Alexander became a man who did not thirst, because those around him felt a little cooler inside. A meal for one who wants to be king is a meal that doesn't break teeth and doesn't lose men. No one said more. The wind blew across the grasslands, carrying the scent of leather, road dust, and fatigue that crumbled like a cracker in their mouths. At that age, you might still crave sleeping in. But Alexander had no time for innocence. Every step, every breath was watched like a rehearsal for the throne. No one told him to be serious, because long ago, all eyes watched him as a king forged in fire and dust. No room for mistakes, no room for naivete. But Alexander was used to eating in a posture ready to die. No spoon, no mother, only a map, and eyes waiting for you to fail so they can die with you. That lunch lasted 9 minutes. Then everyone mounted up, as if no meal had happened at all. Alexander stroked his chin, not in thought, but to check if his left molar was still there. Because to be king, you don't need pretty teeth, but you do need to get used to pain without anesthesia. There are dinners held in castles, there are dinners in tents, and there is a dinner held in a very quiet space where you sit facing someone who once tried to kill you, but now shares the same wine. Alexander was about 20. That was after the Battle of Granicus, the first battle in Asia Minor. The blood river had not yet drained, but Alexander sat like a rightful king. The enemy did not come to congratulate, but to see if they could keep their heads by saying one wrong word. The first campaign in Asia ended with stunning success and handshakes full of hidden daggers. Dinner was served inside the camp. Food not much different from the soldiers. Roasted goat with burnt edges, thin pressed barley bread, and a jar of wine so watered down it had less grape than faith in peace. Alexander once said, "I don't eat better than soldiers, I just eat faster. No music, no flowers. Just roasted goat, barley bread, and the unblinking gaze of a defeated general." He spoke in a tone more polite than any chronicle. "Congratulations, great king. You truly strike faster than rumors." Alexander smiled, but did not bare teeth. He knew well the man opposite had led armies against him. But instead of executing him, Alexander kept him, like holding a necessary pawn on a broader chessboard. Forgiveness, if used right, can be a sweeter punishment than any sword's edge. Strike fast to apologize less. I don't like apologies, especially to those I must forgive. No one raised a glass, because the wine was not brought for joy, but to see who drinks first, and who looks down first. The food tasted good, but no one noticed, because every dish could be poison, every word could be a probe, and the spoon, looking innocent, was the last weapon if the sword broke. Alexander did not eat much. He had heard stories of kings using food tasters, and thus never trusted the idea of a safe meal. No matter how high you sit, Alexander knew a single drop of poison, smaller than a lentil, could bring an empire tumbling from the tongue. Not out of fear, but because the mind needed to stay sharp enough to read the scent of betrayal. While others chewed, he watched the hands, trembling hands, sweaty hands, hands gripping knives too tight. A true king does not look at his own bowl, but at the reflections of those sitting with him. When the meal ended, Alexander stood first. No delicious said, no until next time, just pulling his cloth, wiping his mouth. No one knew if Alexander truly trusted the oath of loyalty from the man opposite, but they knew one thing: he never forgave twice. Whoever was kept at that dinner would live on, with a heavier duty than death, and walked straight to the command tent, where maps never sleep, and the eastern wind whispered that this dinner was just the appetizer for an empire still growing inside his belly. Because the price of sitting high is never loosening your grip when cutting meat, never forgetting the man opposite you today could be the one stabbing you in the back next week. You might be sitting there, biting into a piece of bread so dry you'd want to sue the bakery. No butter, no honey. Ancient Greek bread had no butter, no egg yolk. It was baked with hot ashes or on stones, and if your teeth ache biting it, that's a sign. You're eating the same kind of bread Alexander once ate, just a hollow carbon block called breakfast. But remember, Alexander ate the same. His bread wasn't any softer. It was even hard enough to need a sword to cut. But between those crumbs, Alexander planned his conquest of Asia. He ate like a soldier, slept like a soldier, but thought like a man changing the map of the world, while others searched for salt to dip in. Alexander was scouting the enemy's position. Some say Alexander ate with one hand, and the other still held the map, because for him, a conquest did not start when the sword was drawn, but when the edge of the map blurred in the soup, because changing history doesn't have to begin on a throne. It can begin on a cold morning with a wooden spoon and an empty belly no one cares about. That rough wooden spoon, splintered at the end, travelled with Alexander hundreds of miles and was the only thing he kept when entering Babylon. Maybe you are eating a sad piece of bread. Maybe you hear whispers in the night, wondering if you're on the right path. But don't forget, we always think history is written in victory, but sometimes it begins while you chew, slow, hard, unseen. A single chew can be a decision. A simple meal can be the start of a map. History, after all, is written in crumbs fallen on the plan. And if there was someone who changed the world after a terrible meal, then you can too. Just don't drop the spoon. DT. Neanderthal lunch, protein and a curved back. And maybe you're lying on your side in the dark with a fan humming softly like distant horse hooves. Maybe you're opening your eyes, waiting for sleep like waiting for a late Greek messenger. So please, take a seat. But this time you're not at home. You are in PELLA, the capital of the ancient Macedonian Empire, around 340 years before the Common Era. And you, yes you, are Alexander, only 20 years old, your head full of Aristotle's poetry, your hand still remembering the feel of holding a sword for the first time. You are sitting at the royal banquet table, facing your father, King Philip II. That man does not need to shout to make others afraid. Just a furrowed brow when he cuts meat is enough to make a Greek city tremble. Before you is a long table covered with a red wine cloth. Plates of roasted lamb with charred edges, bread hard as an old general's pride, and wine, never ending in this palace. To your left is Antipater, his face never changing even when hearing news of rebellion in Thrace. To your right, Parmenion, the old general who has followed Philip since the first campaign, now only nods lightly whenever the king glances his way. A little further, Aristotle sits quietly, still holding a cup, as if analyzing your words 3 times before swallowing. The clink of cups echoes like unsaid metaphors, the scent of spices, charcoal smoke, and a little tension, because tonight's dinner is not just for eating, it is a chess game, with lamb as pawns, wine as rooks, and every glance from the king-father, a threat clad in fur. You have not said a word, but the whole table hears your breath. Inside, you repeat the rumors you heard this morning, about Athens sending envoys to Byzantium, about your father possibly crowning another son, a half-brother. It's funny. They talk about dividing the throne, while you're dividing a piece of bread as hard as stone crust. Your father smiles, tilts his head, as if reading your thoughts beforehand. This son, he mutters, he studies philosophy well, but has never tasted failure. The atmosphere freezes in a blink. A general sips wine, a poet glances at Aristotle, and you remain silent, not because you're afraid, but because you know, in this room, whoever speaks first is the weaker one. Welcome to dinner with King Philip II, where every bite smells of conspiracy, and every raised glass could be a sweet declaration of war. Dinner begins, and you, the child of an empire waiting to grow, sit upright, knife in hand, eyes ready like a drawn arrow. You do not know, or maybe you sense, that just a few years later, the hallway leading to this dining room will echo with hurried footsteps, unsheathing swords, and a silence long as history, because one day King Philip, the father before you, will be stabbed to death as he walks into his daughter's wedding feast, and you will become king, not because he chooses you, but because no one else lives long enough to stop it. The red-hot coals in the corner still glow, and the smell of lamb isn't quite pleasant yet. It reminds more of the battlefield than a dining room, acrid, pungent, and sticky in the air. A young servant awkwardly pours wine, spilling a few drops onto the goatskin map spread across the table. No one scolds him, but Philip's eyes flash colder than the chilled Illyrian wine. On the map are names no one but the court may touch: Byzantium, Thrace, Chalcidice, and a red ink circle just drawn around Athens. Philip leans slightly, his finger tracing the Aegean Sea. Do they think Byzantium can resist me just because Athens sent a few ships? He mutters with disdain. You know well, Athens is trying to build an alliance against your father, and Byzantium, the lifeline gateway between Europe and Asia, is a bet your father never loses. War with Athens is no longer a question of if, but when. They think they can blockade the Aegean Sea against me, Philip says, not looking at anyone, but tapping his cup. The tapping is steady, cold, and rhythmic as a marching drum. Alexander sits silent. You look at the map, at the overlapping lines. They are not just territories. They are cuts on Macedon's back. You see both wounds and ambition. You wonder, if your name is one day etched on the map, will it be in the red ink or in blood? An old general across the table clears his throat and begins telling of last year's battle in Thessaly, where Philip crushed the Southern Alliance with just 3,000 archers. Someone chuckles softly. Someone sips wine to forget worries. You do not smile. You remember clearly. Thessaly was the first place you held a real sword, wore real armor, and saw real death. The smell of blood then wasn't much different from lamb. Philip turns to you. What do you think about conquering Athens before winter? The question drops like a fishbone, sharp as a political scalpel. You answer slowly, clearly, with no hidden blade, just as Aristotle taught you. Victory is not just defeating the enemy. It's making them tell the story in a way that benefits you. You remember that? The teacher once whispered it when the two of you sat by a small stream, dipping a paddle in the water, philosophy falling slowly like autumn leaves. I think the Greeks will fight fiercest when they know they're about to lose. Someone breathes deeply. Someone stops chewing. Philip smiles. The smile is not exactly approving. Just like his father, he says. Only difference is, I never thought I'd lose. Then he raises his glass, voice low. Then we'll give them a reason to think so. You clink glasses. Your hands are cold, but your eyes burn like the fire in the room. War has not broken out, but in this room, it's already seasoned. You sneak a look back at the map. If you were in command, you wouldn't head straight to the coast like your father. You'd circle Thessaly, force the Athenian army to retreat inland, then strike from the rear by night, not to show off your cunning, but because you thought of it while sitting in Aristotle's geometry class. Every straight line on the ground, for you, could be a road to glory or death. A plate of goat cheese is set in the middle of the table. That seemingly harmless food, soft, fragrant, pale yellow, is the excuse for a silent clash between two generations. Philip leans in, cuts a small piece, and pushes it toward you. Cleopatra told me not to eat too much goat cheese. She fears her son will be lazy with his speech, he says lightly, like throwing a stone into a calm lake. Cleopatra Eurydice, Philip's new wife, young, beautiful, and pure Macedonian. Unlike your mother, Olympias of Epirus, whispered to be a witch, a foreigner. You know well, every recent word your father says carries the scent of choice and replacement. I heard in Athens they don't eat goat cheese, fearing it clouds the reading of poetry. He smiles, not exactly friendly. You smile softly, politely, and take the cheese. You know he's testing you, like testing a knife by cutting into a ripe grape. A remark about Athens' poetic voice, seemingly a joke, but actually a test of how tough you are under a soft shell. Maybe because they don't need to shout on the battlefield, you reply, not loudly, but enough to make some stop chewing. Parmenion clears his throat. Antipater looks down at his wine. Aristotle says nothing, but his eyes glance as if judging the ethics of a line of verse. The feast continues, but the mood shifts. A young general accidentally drops a knife on the stone floor. The clang rings harsh like a cut into political flesh. No one laughs. No one speaks. Antipater glances quickly at Philip, then lowers his head. Parmenion chews more slowly, as if he has hot lead in his mouth instead of cheese. Every movement around the table becomes a new language, no longer a meal, but a battlefield draped in red silk and soft cheese. Philip looks at you longer than usual. What do you think? Should people rule by books or by the sword? A question not new, but placed in this context, it's a poisoned spear wrapped in honey. You put down your glass. People should rule by the sword, but keep it wrapped in a book cover. There's a slow, short laugh from the corner of the room. But Philip does not smile. He only slices a thinner piece of cheese and pushes it toward the center of the table. Well, you learn from your teacher, but forget that the victor doesn't have to explain. You look at him. eyes neither challenging nor backing down. You think silently. Maybe. Because victors don't have to explain. Those remembered are those who once spoke up. And you want to be remembered. You say nothing. You just cut your cheese into two. For a fleeting moment, you think of your mother, Olympias, who once said, "If you're not careful, the banquet table will be the last place you see your father." She was never invited to this table, but her influence never left this room. Half left on the plate, half eaten slowly, not because you were hungry, but because you knew. Every bite tonight was seasoned with the question, who will inherit power? And the answer was sprinkled like pepper on the cheese. You haven't even put down your knife when a glass of wine is poured, this time by Philip himself. "Drink," he says, "to remember there are things meant to pass down your throat, not to come up from your mouth." You raise the glass, eyes fixed on him. Strong wine, so strong that a sip can make a normal man lose his voice. You drink, slowly, without grimacing. Then you set the glass down, gently. "I think," you say, "silence is also a weapon." Aristotle inhales sharply. You know this is no longer wordplay. His gaze meets yours like a silent question mark. Not judgment, but illumination. You feel like he's rewriting a footnote under your name in his mind. Alexander, the student, the warrior, and now, the challenger of his father. Philip presses his lips together, smiles without smiling. "Weapon," he repeats. "No one holds a crown with silence." A young general bursts out laughing. A mistake. Philip shoots a glance. The man falls silent instantly, as if strangled by his own laughter. "People honor the victor," Philip continues, "not for sweet words, but for the enemy's corpse still on his cloak." You nod. No rebuttal. But you feel it. That sip of wine, though swallowed, is still burning inside your chest. You put down the glass like setting down a sword. No echo left, but a tremor remains. Someone at the head of the table shifts. A small move, but like a bell tolling, the battle has shifted one notch. You don't need to shout. Just survive and watch. You know clearly, that wasn't a toast. It was an insult diluted with fermented grapes. You've seen him drunk, so drunk he couldn't tell saddle from stairs, so drunk he had to lean on you to enter the temple. And now he uses wine like a weapon, both to make people forget and to bow their heads. And you just drank it all. Also a glass of wine, you think. But unlike Socrates chose death because he wouldn't betray the philosophy he lived by. But you keep living because you cannot betray the role you must carry. No one forced you to drink, but the whole room waited for you to swallow, as if waiting for a silent ritual to complete. But the taste lingers on your lips, persistent, like a doubt. Did he ever truly believe in you? Dinner ends with the scraping of a chair, slow, dry, and heavy, like the blade of a sword scratching stone. The generals rise quietly. No one speaks. Aristotle clasps his hands behind his back, nodding lightly at you, as if he has seen something unspeakable. Philip leaves without turning back. His cloak brushes over the map, still stained with breadcrumbs and wine spills. You remain seated, alone, amid the cooled feast. You look down at the plate, where once was cheese, roasted lamb, and the invisible boundary between succession and exclusion. The smell of wine lingers in your throat, but the scent of decision has soaked into your bones. You understand, this is not just dinner. It is a battle without swords. a declaration without ink, a cut just deep enough to remind, but not enough to kill. You rise, not hurried, not staggering. In your mind, everything Aristotle taught, everything your mother once said, and everything your father left unspoken, quietly assembles into strategy. Because one day, when the world calls you Alexander the Great, no one will remember this dinner, but you will, not for the food, but for the silence afterward, stretching like the shadow of your father cast on the pillar walls. That night, the palace was silent. Servants stepped lightly. The whole city of Pella seemed to hold its breath, because everyone knew, when a father and son don't look at each other leaving the table, the dynasty has begun to shake, not by sword, but by distance, because some cuts don't bleed, but still hurt, and sometimes the greatest empires